The first question in verses 1 through 8 is, what makes Mordecai and Esther great leaders? And we see here that God gifts both men and women with leadership gifts, and that he brings them into influential, powerful positions. Those here are political in nature, and we're going to see that Esther is the queen and that Mordecai has assumed Haman's position in authority. And so here we go, chapter 8, verse 1. We see three things that make them great leaders. The first is their acceptance and exercising of authority. On that day, King Ahasuerus, that's his Persian name, Xerxes is his Greek name, gave to Queen Esther, and this is important, Esther here is in her position of queen. She is in this position of authority. I want you to see that. The house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. And the king took off his signet ring that he had taken from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Here's what's happened. Haman was in authority, and then in a reversal, Haman was crucified in his own yard on the impaling rod that he built for Mordecai. And then Esther tells the king, Mordecai's my adopted father. A death sentence was put out on his head. Haman, who you empowered to sentence him to death, is a godless and evil man. You need to destroy him, and he's destroyed. And then we see a reversal where Mordecai takes Haman's position. Now, Haman is like, in our context, he'd be like the vice president. He's the second in command. And he now has a great deal of wealth, because what happens is that not only does Haman die, all of his estate goes to Mordecai. So now Mordecai just went from being powerless to powerful, not having access to the king to having access to the king, and from being, insofar as we could tell, fairly poor to being very rich, and from a very low-level job near the city gate, working for the government, to being the vice president in a day. That's the favor and grace of God on the life of Mordecai. And importantly, the story is told that he is given the signet ring of the king. And the signet ring is exceedingly important. In our day, this is the equivalent of the legal power of attorney. Right? If someone is sick or elderly or struggling or dying, they will give power of attorney to someone that is trustworthy and will look after their affairs and their estate. They then have the legal right to make decisions on behalf of that other person. Giving the signet ring to Mordecai means that he now has the legal authority of Xerxes, the most powerful man on the earth. And I want you to see here that they, Esther and Mordecai, God's people, they accept their position of authority. Here's my question to you. What authority do you have? What authority do you have? Every one of us has some degree of authority. And here's what God wants you to do. Humbly accept it. That's what they do. Now, they would have had innumerable excuses why they would have not felt fit for this role. Esther could have said, well, I don't come from a royal bloodline. I'm not ready to be the queen. I'm young. She's probably in her early to mid-20s at this point. I don't have an MBA in leadership. I'm not ready to be the queen. Mordecai, all we know of him is he's a bad leader. And that's all he's done so far, is lead kind of badly. And all of a sudden, he's vice president, he's ruling over the nation, he's got the power and the authority to decree life and death. Could have been easy for Mordecai to say, I don't really feel like I'm the best person for the job. We'd all say, yeah, we sort of see that too. But if you're humble, you love God, you love people, you do your best, and the grace of God, it'll be all right. Some of you have resisted the positions of authority and leadership that God has opened for you. And maybe God wants you to assume those positions because it's not about you and your fear of failure. It's about people and an opportunity to help them. And sometimes the people who feel least qualified for leadership are most qualified because they have the first prerequisite, which is humility. Humility.